If you need legal help, then you need Bordas & Bordas, because our goal is to deliver the maximum result for every case we handle. Success speaks for itself. Bordas & Bordas. Our passion is to protect people.
Hi, I'm Jamie Bordas. Welcome to the Bordas & Bordas Legal Review. Each week we bring you relevant legal topics from the Valley, the state, and around the nation. The last 2 weeks we've broken down the first and second presidential debates between President Barack Obama and Governor Mitt Romney. Once again with me this week is former national debate champion and Wheeling attorney Chris Regan. Chris, thanks for coming back on the show to talk about this third and final debate.
Well, thanks for having me on, Jamie.
Sure thing. You know, we talked the last week about how Governor Romney took the first debate, President Obama won the second debate, and then we have this third and final debate. And it seemed as though the president really made an effort to demonstrate to the American public that perhaps Governor Romney is not the person you want making decisions when it comes to foreign policy.
Well, that's right. I think these debates have played such a large role in the home stretch of this campaign that this third debate was really the most anticipated one. And that theme of anticipation was really reflected in both men's strategy, particularly, as you mentioned, President Obama wanting to make sure he conveyed his idea, his theme of the debate, which is, you're not safe with this man. You can't switch presidencies at this time to Mitt Romney. He's dangerously inexperienced. He's dangerously inconsistent in his views on foreign policy. And you don't want to go switching horses in midstream to Mitt Romney. And that was President Obama's theme. He definitely came in planning to establish that and took a shot at doing that very early on in the debate.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned switching horses, because horses was one of the big memorable things from this debate. The line from President Obama about we don't have as many horses and bayonets as we used to. Again, trying to demonstrate that, you know, Governor Romney has maybe read about foreign policy in the newspaper, but he hasn't actually done it like President Obama has the last 4 years. And he tried to play on that theme throughout the night with the horses and bayonets comment with respect to the comment about Russia being the biggest geopolitical threat, and President Obama saying the 1980s want their foreign policy back. Things like that. And then again, you know, Governor Romney even hurt himself in some instances by talking about the Middle Eastern geography and getting some things wrong. So overall, do you think the president was able to demonstrate that perhaps we're better off with him in the White House when it comes to foreign policy?
Well, I think he had some answers where he was able to do that successfully, and some where he took a little bit more of a risk by using some of the sarcastic comments that you mentioned there. Those have the ability to persuade your fans, people who really like you already. But when you're using sarcastic remarks, they don't tend to persuade undecided voters. So I think President Obama had some successes that we can take a look at, but he had some other ones that I think will be iffy in terms of whether they'll pay dividends in the election voting results.
You know, and Chris, that's one of the interesting points from all this is that, you know, winning debates is nice, but at the end of the day, the object is to win votes. And it'll be interesting to see how all this plays out because, for example, on the horses and bayonets comment, really it was having to do with battleships. And one of the big battleground states is Virginia, where ships are made down in Norfolk. I was there earlier this year for some depositions in a case, and I got to walk around and see the different shipyards, and I found it to be fascinating because I'd never been there before. But the folks in that state may look at that and say, you know, maybe he's not for building ships, and maybe that actually swings in Governor Romney's way. You know, it's hard to say.
Oh, that's a good insight, Jamie. I mean, I think it's important for people to understand that as you watch some of the cable news shows like Hannity on Fox, or if you watch Chris Matthews on NBC, people need to appreciate that the votes of those men are not up for grabs. They've made up their minds. So the only question in these debates is, what are the candidates doing to win over undecided voters, to win over people who haven't committed to one side or the other? And as you point out, you know, President Obama may not have had Virginia in mind when he thought, well, I'm making Governor Romney look bad with a quip about how many ships we had at the Battle of Jutland versus how many we have now. But there are a lot of important votes in Virginia. And just a small slice of the electorate that's undecided is going to decide who's going to be our next president. So how do these things appeal to those folks specifically?
Well, you know, you mentioned that one of the themes that President Obama tried to carry out throughout the evening was that you can't trust Mitt Romney, that he's all over the place. And we're going to take a look at a clip that shows where President Obama is trying to drive home this point. And he also, in doing that, is able to mention or talk about one of the biggest victories he's had as president, which is getting Osama bin Laden, which is a big victory when it comes to foreign policy, which is what this debate was all about. So let's take a look at this first clip.
Governor, the problem is that on a whole range of issues, whether it's the Middle East, whether it's Afghanistan, whether it's Iraq, whether it's now Iran, you've been all over the map. I mean, I'm pleased that you now are endorsing our policy of applying diplomatic pressure and potentially having bilateral discussions with the Iranians to end their nuclear program. But just a few years ago, you said that's something you'd never do. In the same way that you initially opposed a timetable in Afghanistan. Now you're for it, although it depends. In the same way that you say you would have ended the war in Iraq, but recently gave a speech saying that we should have 20,000 more folks in there. The same way that you said that it was mission creep to go after Gaddafi. When it comes to going after Osama bin Laden, you said, well, any president would make that call. But when you were a candidate in 2008, as I was, and I said if I got bin Laden in our sights, I would take that shot, you said we shouldn't move heaven and earth to get one man. And you said we should ask Pakistan for permission.
So, Chris, there, once again, President Obama is trying to drive home the point of, Governor Romney, you've been all over the place on these things, and what the American people need is to know where you stand. And they can know where I stand. I do what I say. Governor Romney doesn't. That's the point?
Right. Yeah, and that's the point politically, and you also see good debating technique that we've talked about in the last two shows. President Obama has a set-piece list of 5 or 6 different things where he's going to contrast what Governor Romney said previously to more recent statements that he's made during this campaign. It's one of the disadvantages that Governor Romney has running for president for 6 years straight is you've said a lot of things about a lot of issues. President Obama took the time to memorize that, create a list that compares and contrasts that, and makes Governor Romney appear to be someone who's inconsistent, someone you can't rely on.
One of the things that the Republican Party had real concerns about heading into this debate was whether or not Governor Romney could deliver a message that would also keep him from being painted as a warmonger. The Republican Party in general, going back to our last Republican president, has had an issue with that. And that was a real goal heading into this debate. And Governor Romney was able to do that somewhat effectively as a result of sometimes saying, and I would do as the president did, and kind of saying, President Obama did this too, so it's okay.
Well, that's absolutely right, Jamie, and that was the counter strategy by Governor Romney all night, was to remain uncontroversial in this foreign policy debate, to frequently agree with the president, to say he would continue the president's policies or that he supports various policies the president has gone with in his 4 years as president so far. That allows him to feel more comfortable to the American people, as though we don't have a big change. In particular, this is a war-weary nation at this point. And the last thing Governor Romney wanted to do was allow himself to be painted as someone who's going to lead us into more war.
Well, let's take a look at an example of that here, Chris, so we can see exactly what you're talking about.
And of course, the greatest threat of all is Iran, 4 years closer to a nuclear weapon. And we're going to have to recognize that we have to do as the president's done. I congratulate him on taking out Osama bin Laden and going after the leadership in Al-Qaeda. But we can't kill our way out of this mess. We're going to have to put in place a very comprehensive and robust strategy to help the world of Islam and other parts of the world reject this radical, violent extremism, which it's certainly not on the run. It's certainly not hiding. This is a group that is now involved in 10 or 12 countries.
In that particular portion of the debate, we saw a good example of Governor Romney saying, we need to have a broader strategy. We should do what the president's done in terms of being on the attack, but have a broader strategy as well. Right. But he doesn't give me details.
That's exactly right, Jamie. I mean, the big question becomes, what does that mean? I mean, a broader strategy, a better strategy, a comprehensive strategy. I mean, these are buzzwords that don't have a lot of content, and that's quite deliberate, I think, on Governor Romney's part. He's playing the part of the almost generic Republican. What are you going to do in foreign policy as a Republican? I'm going to get tough. I'm going to be a little bit tougher than this man. How am I going to be tougher? Well, I'm not going to be real clear on that, but I'm going to be tougher. and that will hopefully bring the results that we want. But he avoids giving any specific details that he can be criticized on, and he also avoids saying anything that will lead to an easy response from the more experienced foreign policy debater he's up against in President Obama.
Yeah, I got the real impression in this particular debate on foreign policy that Governor Romney just didn't want to get hurt. I mean, he feels like, his strength right now perhaps is the economy, because the president has presided over 4 years of where we've still been in economic difficulty. And if he could just hold his own and not get hurt too bad on foreign policy and just kind of play the middle ground, he'd be okay.
Absolutely. One of the most dramatic turnarounds of the entire election has been from the first debate to the third debate. Jamie, in the first debate, we saw Governor Romney on the attack ruthlessly, trying to score points on President Obama every single answer. That was when Governor Romney was very far down in the polls and needed to do something to shake the race up. Now, 2 debates later, it almost seems as Governor Romney is trying to play the role of the presumptive winner, someone who just needs to run out the clock and have no gaffes or embarrassing moments in the debate that will really hurt his chances. Whereas President Obama in this last debate was very much on the attack, as we saw in the first clip.
Well, we need to take a break. When we come back, we'll continue speaking with Wheeling attorney and former national debate champion Chris Regan regarding the third and final presidential debate. Stay tuned.
If you need legal help, then you need Bordas & Bordas, because our goal is to deliver the maximum result for every case we handle. Success speaks for itself. Bordas & Bordas. Our passion is to protect people.
I'm Jamie Bordas. Welcome back to the Bordas & Bordas Legal Review. I'm here this week with Wheeling attorney and former national debate champion Chris Regan, talking about the third and final presidential debate. Chris, before we took the break, we were talking about some of the clips from the third debate. And one of the things that we saw with respect to this final debate on foreign policy was President Obama pointing out that perhaps Governor Romney is not up on the times and doesn't understand exactly what our foreign policy issues are.
Right, and what we're going to see here pretty soon is President Obama starts to sense Governor Romney's strategy, if he hadn't expressly prepared for it, and is going to go after it and simply begin to say that while what Governor Romney is saying may seem appropriate at this time, again, he's inexperienced, he's been inconsistent, and you can't trust him. And to do that, he has to go on the attack, and does so effectively, I think, in this next clip.
Well, let's go ahead and take a look at it right now.
Governor Romney, I'm glad that you recognize that al-Qaeda is a threat, because a few months ago, when you were asked what's the biggest geopolitical threat facing America, you said Russia. Not al-Qaeda, you said Russia. In the 1980s are now calling to ask for their foreign policy back, because the Cold War has been over for 20 years. But Governor, when it comes to our foreign policy, you seem to want to import the foreign policies of the 1980s, just like the social policies of the 1950s and the economic policies of the 1920s. You say that you're not interested in duplicating what happened in Iraq, but just a few weeks ago you said you think we should have more troops in Iraq right now. And the challenge we have, I know you haven't been in a position to actually execute foreign policy, but every time you've offered an opinion, you've been wrong.
I thought this was one of the points of the debate where the president really tried to hammer home, you want to be president, I am the president. And there's a big difference between the two. What are your thoughts there?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you have to capitalize on that in this type of situation if you're President Obama. I mean, that was something, quite frankly, that John McCain tried to do to then Senator Obama 4 years ago, is simply say that this man has not been in the arena, as John McCain had been in the Senate for many, many years involved in foreign policy, and now President Obama is turning around and trying hard to do that to Governor Romney. Hey, this guy was governor of a state. That was 10 years ago. He's worked in the private sector. He doesn't know what he's doing when it comes to our developing foreign policy throughout the world. And he used several misstatements and obviously a planned attack there to try to establish that with you're importing the foreign policy of the 1980s. You're old, you're out of touch, you're not ready for this. And that's the message he wanted to send to undecided voters.
And I thought Governor Romney helped the president out a little bit by making some missteps himself, and opened the door for the president to continue to try to drive home that theme, in particular with some errors with respect to Middle Eastern geography.
Oh, there's no question about it. Governor Romney had a real tough spot there where he described Syria as Iran's path to the sea, and some other mistakes that were really unforced errors on his part. He didn't have too many of them throughout the night, but that was certainly one of them.
Well, and I got to admit, my Middle Eastern geography isn't the greatest either, but I'm not running for president, of course, and I'm not going to have to make those decisions. So, as I was watching the debate, I had my iPad in front of me, and I right away started going to the Middle Eastern map on my iPad to see, because that sounded not right to me, but I wanted to check it and make sure, and sure enough, Governor Romney had gotten that wrong. But let's take a look at that particular clip.
What's happening in Syria and how important it is. First of all, 30,000 people being killed by their government is a humanitarian disaster. Secondly, Syria is an opportunity for us because Syria plays an important role in the Middle East, particularly right now. Syria is Iran's only ally in the Arab world. It's their route to the sea. It's the route for them to arm Hezbollah in Lebanon, which threatens, of course, our ally Israel. And so seeing Syria remove Assad is a very high priority for us. Number two, seeing the replacement government being responsible people is critical for us. And finally, we don't want to have military involvement there. We don't want to get drawn into a military conflict. And so the right course for us is working through our partners and with our own resources to identify responsible parties within Syria, organize them, bring them together in a form of if not government, a form of council that can take the lead in Syria, and then make sure they have the arms necessary to defend themselves.
So, we saw there, Governor Romney's delivery was fine. I mean, he's given facts that sound like he's prepared, that sounds like he's got something to say, but the problem is he was wrong.
Oh, boy. I mean, just anybody can make a mistake, and you don't want to make too much of it. But, I mean, Iran is not a landlocked country, as many people have pointed out. It obviously is there on the Persian Gulf. And its control over shipping lanes for oil has been a geopolitical issue for at least half a century. So to say that, Syria might be Iran's connection to the Mediterranean, but it is certainly not their connection to the sea in any way, shape, or form. But I think what's going to turn up later in ads is the latter half of that answer from Governor Romney that hasn't gotten as much attention. When Governor Romney talks about arming the rebels, getting in contact with them, supporting them, and then arming them to overthrow the government of Syria, those are acts of war. And I think that answer can be used in just the way the Obama presidencies wanted to show that Governor Romney is someone who could lead us into another war in the Middle East. You cannot say we are going to arm the rebels and overthrow the government without committing yourself essentially to war against Syria. And that's a dangerous proposition at this point.
One of the Republican hallmarks of campaigns throughout the years has been, hey, we're going to spend more money on defense. We're going to spend more money on the military. And Governor Romney, that's part of his plan. President Obama has pointed out in a number of the debates that Governor Romney intends to spend $2 trillion more on the military that the military is not even asking for. And I think that the president, although he didn't need to point that out so much in this debate because he's done it so much, he did use Governor Romney's point that he was attempting to make about ships and kind of tried to turn it around on the governor. We talked about that earlier.
Quite so. I mean, that's been a tradition, at least dating to the Carter and Mondale campaigns, of the Democrat being painted as soft on defense. That's been very difficult to do. I mean, President Obama has prosecuted wars aggressively. Obviously, he's expanded dramatically the drone-targeted killings and assassinations in the Middle East. And so it's tough to paint him as soft on defense. But nonetheless, as, again, a fairly obligatory matter, Governor Romney tries to do that, saying that President Obama won't allow us to have sufficient ships in our Navy to conduct the foreign policy of the United States.
Well, let's take a look at Governor Romney doing that, and then after that we'll come back and talk about it and then take a look at President Obama's response. So let's take a look at Governor Romney here.
Our Navy is smaller now than any time since 1917. The Navy said they needed 313 ships to carry out their mission. We're now down to 285. We're headed down to the low 200s if we go through with sequestration. That's unacceptable to me.
All right, so there we have an example of Governor Romney talking about how, we don't have as many ships as we used to have, and he's trying to make that point that, hey, if I'm president, I'm going to make sure we're fully armed, we're ready to go, we're ready to fight and defend ourselves. But President Obama gives a response that's pretty memorable.
A very generically Republican argument made there. Simply, we need more ships. More is better, is all you're getting from Governor Romney there. It sounds right. I mean, I think everybody would feel better with more ships, but he doesn't give any explanation of what the ships are for. And President Obama makes him pay for that right away.
Well, let's go ahead and take a look at President Obama's response.
Because the nature of our military has changed. We have these things called aircraft carriers where planes land on them. We have these ships that go underwater, nuclear submarines. And so the question is not a game of battleship where we're counting ships. It's what are our capabilities? And so when I sit down with the Secretary of the Navy and the Joint Chiefs of Staff, we determine how are we going to be best able to meet all of our defense needs in a way that also keeps faith with our troops, that also makes sure that our veterans have the kind of support that they need when they come home. And that is not reflected in the kind of budget that you're putting forward because it just doesn't work.
Perhaps a memorable remark. I mean, if the president ends up winning re-election, the comment about the horses, the bayonets, and the counting battleships may be something that is remembered for many years in American politics.
Yeah, I mean, look, I've been there many times, Jamie. I mean, you're exactly right. If he wins, that was funny and really wounded the governor. But if President Obama loses, was it too sarcastic? Did it come off as testy or obnoxious and belittling towards the governor? Neither one of them really established what we were going to do with these ships one way or the other. But it was kind of a funny moment. I have to say I enjoyed seeing the president go after that. But whether it will work with undecided voters, that's the real question.
Well, and I guess we'll find out. You know, not much time left until the election now. Early voting's underway. People were putting their votes into the ballot box. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. But I think overall we probably have to score this two debates for the president and one for Governor Romney.
Well, the main score I'm concerned about is Saturday night in Oklahoma, where I think Notre Dame will use their young freshman mobile quarterback to defeat the Sooners. I'm excited about it, and I know you are too.
Well, I know you're going to be heading out to Norman, Chris, and I think turnovers will be the key. We'll see. I think if Notre Dame can protect the football and not turn it over, then they got a real good chance. But if they turn it over, then they may be in trouble. But thanks for joining us again here for the third week in a row on the Bordas and Bordas Legal Review to talk about the presidential debates. I've enjoyed speaking with you about it. I always enjoy our conversations, so thanks for being here again.
It's been a pleasure, Jamie.
And thank you all for joining us again on the Bordas and Bordas Legal Review. We come every single week, and join us again next week for another edition. Thanks for being with us today.